Alright. Prophecy. The name of prophet signifies throughout a great part of Western tradition an eminence and dignity not shared by the scientists, the philosopher, the statesman, or even the sage. The soothsayer and the seer in pagan antiquity, and the prophet of the Lord in Israel, do not claim to speak from a merely human wisdom or to declare truths they have learned by inquiry or reflection, nor are their utterances concerned with the nature of things. Prophet claims to know what men cannot know by any exercise of human powers. He enjoys special gifts. He is divinely inspired. He is instructed by God, or has in some way been admitted to the secrets of the gods. His knowledge is not only of supernatural origin, it deals with supernatural matters. Prophecy is more than a prediction of the future. It unveils what fate holds in store for men. It foretells the course of providence. In most cases, the future predicted has deep moral significance, expressing the pleasure or displeasure of the gods with individuals or nations, or manifesting God's justice and the rewards promised those who keep his commandments, and the punishment awaiting those who break them. The prophet's foresight discerns more than the future. It discovers what men can hope for or must fear according to their merits, not in the eyes of men, but in the sight of God. This understanding of prophecy seems to be involved in the major issues which the great books raise about prophets. For example, the problem of distinguishing between true and false prophets goes beyond the mere truth or falsity of a prophet's utterances to the validity of his claim to special sources of knowledge, or a supernaturally inspired understanding of dreams and visions, omens and portents. The false prophet is not like the mistaken scientist or philosopher, just a person in error. He is either a deceiving impostor or a self-deceived victim of his own pathology. Similarly, the Christian theologians who criticize the pagan cult of oracles and all forms of divination, who seek to pry into divine mysteries, seem to imply that the seers and soothsayers of Greece and Rome, unlike the Hebrew prophets, did not have the gift of prophecy. The acceptance or rejection of prophets and of ways of foreseeing what has been planned in heaven cannot, it seems, be separated from a whole system of religious beliefs. In this respect, prophets are like miracles. Without faith, both are incredible, There be two marks, writes Hobbes, by which together, not asunder, a true prophet is to be known. One is the doing of miracles, the other is the not teaching any other religion than that which is already established. Hobbes's view that there be a religion already established among a people is the one indispensable condition for their reception of prophets or their experience of miracles. That's not what Jesus... Well, I don't know. It's weird to say that he taught a different religion. Issues concerning prophecy may therefore occur within a single religious community, or be relative to differences between religious communities, as for example, the opposition between Jewish and Christian interpretation of the messianic prophecies in the Old Testament. Necessarily, then, there is an issue between the unbelievers and the religious of any faith. Those who deny the existence of God, or the gods, or divine agency in the temporal affairs of men, and certainly those who deny the credentials of revelation, cannot but regard prophets as misled and misleading, and those who accept prophecy as gullible or superstitious. In the pagan tradition, a philosopher like Aristotle may, however, be critical of divination, and an historian like Thucydides may cast doubt on oracles without discrediting all other religious beliefs or being themselves atheists. Some who reject religious prophecy do not concede that man's natural desire to peer into the future need be completely balked, but the secular substitutes for religious prophecy appear to alter the meaning of prophecy. Scientific predictions of the future of the world or of life on this planet, as for example those which occur in the writings of Lucretius or Darwin, may be accompanied by attributes of moral qualities to nature, but usually they connote nature's sublime indifference to man's welfare. They are seldom, if ever, read as promises or threats of what man deserves to have befall him. Similarly, historians turned prophets or philosophers of history who, like Spengler, prophesy decline and doom, do not exhort men to avert disaster, as do the prophets of the Old Testament, nor do those who, like Hegel and Marx, foresee the ultimate goal toward which events inevitably march, urge men to prepare themselves for it, as do the prophecies of the New Testament, which speak of the second coming of Christ. Secular prophecies, which bespeak the inevitable operation of necessary causes, are, in this respect, like pagan previsions of fate. At most, they leave man only the illusion of free choice. Jewish and Christian prophecy, in contrast, address man as a responsible agent, who, even when he knows something of God's will, remains free to will good or evil for himself. If, according to the theologians, divine providence or predestination does not abolish human freedom, neither does prophetic knowledge of the divine plan. These matters are discussed elsewhere. Secular prophecy, in the chapters on history and progress, and the problem of foreknowledge and freedom in the chapters on fate and necessity and contingency. In pagan antiquity, prophecy does not seem to be confined to men especially appointed by the gods. The gods themselves foretell the future to men. When people wish to know the future, they go or send emissaries to the temple at Delphi, over which a goddess, the Pythoness, presides. The institution of the oracles, of which Delphi is perhaps the most illustrious example, leaves foresight in the hands of the gods, for as most of the anecdotes in Herodotus and Thucydides show, only the Pythoness herself knows unequivocally the meaning of her oracular utterances. To men is left the task of interpreting what the oracle means. The pagan, unlike the Hebrew prophet, seems to be a man of skill in penetrating the secrets of the gods, a skill which may itself be divinely bestowed. But he is not a man to whom the gods have spoken plainly, so that he may in turn unerringly advise others. No man, when in his wits, according to Plato, attains prophetic truth and inspiration. There are passages in the Greek poets and historians which seem to suggest that the gods begrudge men too clear a vision of the future, and may even on occasion mislead them, or at least permit them to be misled. In Aeschylus's play, Prometheus declares that because he gave to men gifts claimed by the gods, he is bound in durance here. He gave them radiant fire, the mechanical arts. He took from men the expectancy of death. He gave them medicines and healing drugs. Last in his own enumeration, and in a sense most significant, he endowed men with the divine gift of foresight. I drew clear lines for divination, Prometheus says. And discerned before all others what from dreams is sure to come to pass. In waking, I disclosed the mysteries of omen-bringing words and pathways, tokens, and made plain the flight of taloned birds, both of good augury and adverse. I cleared the way for mortals to an art hard of discernment, and made bright and clear fire auguries, heretofore obscure and blind. The chorus questions whether the power of creatures creeping for an hour shall by wisdom overpass the bounds set by their little lives by the mind of Zeus. Does the wisdom of foreknowledge, gained through the arts of divination, give men strength to resist the will of the gods, or to struggle against them? Prometheus himself is the answer to the question. The power he wields over Zeus, for which Zeus tries to wrest from him by bribes and threats, and by the infliction of titanic pain, is the foreknowledge which Prometheus possesses of the doom to befall the son of Cronos. No threat of Zeus will get him to divulge it. Prometheus says, because naught can surprise me who foreknow, naught in his power shall bend me to reveal whom fate prepares to work his overthrow. A myth which Socrates relates in the Gorgias appears to contain a sequel to the legend as told by Aeschylus. It also seems to confirm the point that foresight is a divine privilege in which men should not share, lest they become too godlike. According to the myth, Zeus, in order to prevent men from evading the divine judgment, says, "In the first place, I will deprive men of the foreknowledge of death. This power which they have, Prometheus has already received my orders to take from them." The oracles never make the future so plain that men can act with a foreknowledge equal to that possessed by the gods, but sometimes oracular utterances seem to be contrived not merely to veil the future, but to lead men astray. Herodotus tells the story of Miltiades, who, on the advice of Timo, a priestess of the goddess of the underworld, acted in a way which brought him to grief. When the Parians sent to Delphi to ask whether Timo should be punished for this, the Pythoness forbade them, saying, "Timo was not at fault. 'Twas decreed that Miltiades should come to an unhappy end, and she was sent to lure him to his destruction." There is also the story told by Thucydides of Cyclon, who, inquiring at Delphi, was told to seize the Acropolis of Athens on the grand festival of Zeus. This too turned into a disastrous misadventure, apparently because, as Thucydides observes, whether the grand festival that was meant was in Attica or elsewhere was a question he never thought of, and which the oracle did not offer to solve. For the most part, however, the calamities which befall men who seek guidance from the oracle seem to be due to their own misinterpretation of the Delphic deliverance, itself always admittedly difficult to understand. Herodotus and Thucydides abound with such stories, and also with instances in which the same oracular statement is given conflicting interpretations, one of which must be wrong. Nevertheless, Herodotus declares himself unwilling to say that there is no truth in prophecies. He is certainly not willing to question those which speak with clearness. Giving an example of a clear prediction, he adds, "When I look to this and perceive how clearly Bacchus spoke, I neither venture myself to say anything against prophecies, nor do I approve of others impugning them." Thucydides appears to take a contrary view. He singles out one example as an instance of faith in oracles being for once justified by the event. He puts into the speech of the Athenians at the Melian conference the warning not to be like the vulgar, who, abandoning such security as human means may still afford, when visible hopes fail them in extremity, turn to invisible, to prophecies and oracles, and other such inventions that delude men with hopes to their destruction. The problem of the reliability of prophecies and of the faith or credulity of those who rely upon them applies not only to oracles, but also to dreams or visions, and to omens and portents of all sorts. 2 stories about Croesus, told by Herodotus, shows that oracles and dreams can be equally ambiguous and are equally liable to misinterpretation. Croesus dreamed that his son Attis would die by the blow of an iron weapon. Subsequently, when Attis wished to go boar hunting with Adrastus, he persuaded Croesus that the dream could not have been a warning against this undertaking, because a boar does not have hands to strike with, nor does it wield iron weapons. But during the hunt, Attis was killed by the spear which Adrastus intended for the boar. On another occasion, Croesus inquired of Delphi how long his kingdom would last. The Pythoness answered, in effect, until a mule is monarch in Media. This not only pleased him because it seemed incredible to him that a mule should ever become king of the Medes, but also gave him confidence when he engaged in war with the Medes and Persians. The Medes and Persians by Cyrus. The war ended in his defeat and capture, but according to Herodotus, he had no right to complain of the oracle because he had misunderstood the answer which had been given him about the mule. Cyrus was the mule, for the parents of Cyrus were of different races and of different kinds. His mother, a Median princess, his father, a Persian subject. I mean, that's a tough one to... I mean, who calls people mules without explaining why? The attitude of the ancients toward these various instruments of prophecy or divination does not seem to be consistent or constant. Herodotus reports at one place how Xerxes, despising the omens, carried out his plans against their forebodings, and at another how an eclipse of the moon, being interpreted as of good omen, rejoiced Xerxes, who, thus instructed, proceeded on his way with great gladness of heart. And again, when Xerxes reports to Artabanus the advice concerning his war against the Greeks, which he received from a dream apparition, Artabanus scoffs, saying, "Such things, my son, have a truth nothing divine in them. Whatever a man has been thinking of during the day is wont to hover round him in the visions of his dreams at night." But when Artabanus himself experiences the same apparition which had occurred to Xerxes in his dream, and, in addition to giving the same advice, the vision threatens him, Artabanus changes his mind about dreams and reverses his policy with regard to the expedition against Greece. As to the divination which takes place in sleep and is said to be based on dreams, Aristotle writes, "We cannot lightly either dismiss it with contempt or give it implicit confidence. Nevertheless, he himself seems to conclude that most so-called prophetic dreams are to be classed as mere coincidences, and that dreams are not sent by God, nor are they designed for this purpose, i.e., foretelling the future. One proof that they are not sent by God is, in his opinion, the fact that the persons having them are not the best and wisest, but merely commonplace persons. The fact that the power of foreseeing the future and of having vivid dreams is found in persons of inferior type implies that God does not send them. The Christian theologians, distinguishing between prophecy and divination, condemn the latter as a kind of presumption or impiety. Though their criticism seems to be directed especially against astrology, it applies to the interpretation of terrestrial as well as celestial signs. Augustine refers to the lying divinations and impious dotages of astrologers, and Aquinas explains how the astrologers are able to foretell things in a general way without attributing to them any genuinely prophetic power. In his consideration of the difference between true and false religion, Hobbes goes further than the theologians in condemning the innumerable other superstitious ways of divination, such as the ambiguous or senseless answers of the priests at Delphi, Delos, Amon, and other famous oracles, or the prediction of witches that pretended conference with the dead, which is called necromancy, conjuring, and witchcraft, and is but juggling and confederate knavery. Or, in general, the recourse to omens, portents, and dreams for purposes of prognostication. That the things Hobbes calls superstitious are not confined to pagan antiquity is manifest in Shakespeare's Macbeth. The witches and the omens there are like the soothsayers and the portents in Julius Caesar, and Macbeth's misunderstanding of "till Burnham Forest come to Dunsinane" is as fatal as Croesus's reliance on "until a mule is monarch in Medea." In one other respect, pagan and Christian cultures seem to exhibit a certain parallelism with regard to the belief in supernatural foreknowledge. The spirits of the departed in the Odyssey and the Aeneid are able to inform the visitor to the underworld of coming events on earth. They speak plainly and with perfect prescience. The veil which hides the future from mortal eyes has been lifted. So too, the damned souls and the blessed foretell future things to Dante, no less accurately, though less extensively than in Paradise Lost. The Archangel Michael unfolds to Adam the whole future history of mankind. But so far as the foreknowledge of mortal men is concerned, the Hebrew prophets seem to be unique. Unlike pagan diviners or soothsayers, they do not probe the future in order to help men anticipate the turns of fortune or the lines of fate. They do not have to employ arts or devices for penetrating divine secrets. God speaks to them directly, and through them to the chosen people. For the most part, their prophetic speeches, unlike those of the oracles, seem to be unambiguous. At least the intention seems to be to reveal, not to conceal, God's plan on such matters, as he himself wishes men to foresee the course of providence. Where pagan prognosticators may claim to be divinely inspired in the sense of having special powers or of interpretation, the Hebrew prophets speak from a different kind of supernatural inspiration. They are the vessels through which the Lord himself speaks. They are interpreters only in that they make known to others what God has made known to them. The content of the divine communication is seldom exclusively a foretelling of the future. It is often accompanied by instruction concerning the actions to be performed by the Jewish people, the direction of their conduct toward the promised land, or the rebuilding of the temple, period. Sometimes when the prophecy is one of doom rather than of hope, as in the case of the destruction of Jerusalem, the Babylonian captivity, or the dispersion of Israel, the prediction of the future is accompanied by moral instruction of another sort. The lessons of the law, which the Jews have forsaken, meriting thereby the punishments the prophets foresee. Mere prognostication does not seem to be the chief purpose of Hebrew prophecy, just as the covenant which God makes with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob consecrates the Jewish people to a special mission, just as the law which God hands down through Moses sets them apart from the Gentiles and prescribes for them the way of righteousness and sanctity. So the revelations of God's providence through the prophets tend to remind the chosen people of the meaning of the covenant and the law, as well as to disclose their destiny as a nation. The prophets speak not only of the future, but of the present and the past. They are divinely appointed teachers, no less than the patriarchs and Moses. Yet they may rank below Moses, who is sometimes also regarded as a prophet. By reason of the manner in which they are addressed by God. As Hobbes points out, God himself in express words declareth that to other prophets he spake in dreams and visions, but to his servant Moses in such manner as a man speaketh to his friend, face to face. The content of Hebrew prophecy, in short, seems to be continuous with the rest of God's revelation of himself to his chosen people. The difference between the prophets as the instruments of God's teaching and the pagan philosophers as merely human teachers seems to Augustine plainly shown by the agreement of the prophets with one another and by their continuity with Moses and the patriarchs, whereas Augustine can find nothing but disagreement and dissension among even the best teachers of the pagans. Among them, false teachers or prophets seem to be accorded the same recognition and to attract the same following as true. But that nation, Augustine writes, that people, that city, that republic, these Israelites to whom the oracles of God were entrusted, by no means confounded with similar license false prophets with the true prophets, but agreeing together and differing in nothing, acknowledged and upheld the authentic authors of their sacred books. These were their philosophers, these were their sages, divines, prophets, and teachers of probity and piety. Whoever was wise and lived according to them was wise and lived, not according to men, but according to God, who hath spoken to them. Hobbes also conceives the prophets of the Old Testament as more than foretellers of the future. The name of prophet, he writes, signifies in Scripture sometimes prolocutor, that is, he that speaketh from God to man, or from man to God, and sometimes predictor, or a foreteller of things to come. In addition to their being divinely appointed teachers, the prophets, according to Hobbes, it's gotta be Hobbes, seem to perform a political function. They check the power of the kings, or seek to awaken their consciousnesses to the dictates of justice and mercy. Through the whole history of the kings, as well of Judah, as of Israel, there were prophets that always controlled the kings for transgressing the religion and sometimes also for errors of state. A secular view of Hebrew prophets seems to give prominence to their political role in the theocratic community of the Jews, comparing the Jewish state with other sacerdotal societies. Mill observes that neither their kings nor their priests ever obtained, as in those other countries, the exclusive molding of their character. Their religion gave existence to an inestimably precious, unorganized institution. The order, if it may be so termed, of the prophets, under the protection, generally, though not always, effectual of their sacred character. The prophets were a power in the nation, often more than a match for kings and priests, and kept up in that little corner of the earth the antagonism of influences which is the only real security for continued progress. As there is a body of prophetic doctrine in the Old Testament, so the religion of the Gospels contains a number of prophetic beliefs peculiar to Christian doctrine. Such, for example, is the prophecy of the second coming of Christ, the prophecy of the last judgment on that occasion, and the prophecy of a final conflagration to cleanse the world, which will precede the resurrection of the body, as that in turn precedes the general judgment of souls. Aquinas discusses the various signs which will foretell the imminence of these events. He also raises the question whether the time of the end of the world and of the resurrection can be known exactly. On this he agrees with Augustine that the time is hidden from men. It cannot be calculated by natural reason, nor is it revealed. Of that day and hour, it is written in Matthew, no one knoweth, no, not the angels of heaven. When the apostles asked Christ about his second coming, he answered, according to St. Paul, "It is not for you to know the times or moments which the Father hath put in his own power." What Christ refused to tell the apostles, Aquinas adds, he will not reveal to others, wherefore all those who have been misled to reckon the aforesaid time have so far proved to be untruthful. For some, as Augustine says, stated from our Lord's ascension to his last coming, 400 years would elapse, others 500, others 1,000. The falseness of these calculators is evident, as will likewise be the falseness of those who even now cease not to calculate. The single greatest prophecy in the Judeo-Christian tradition is perhaps the Messianic prophecy, the foretelling of a Messiah, or of a Messianic age. The prediction of a Messiah, or Savior, who shall be born of the house of David, and shall be King of the Jews, runs throughout the prophetic books of the Old Testament, though with different degrees of explicitness and varying imagery. In Daniel and Jeremiah, in Isaiah and Ezekiel. The Lord himself shall give you a sign, says Isaiah. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. Isaiah goes on, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with justice from henceforth even forever. And Jeremiah tells his people, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. In his days Judah shall be saved, and Israel shall dwell safely. Two of the great issues between the Jewish and Christian faiths concern these messianic prophecies in the Old Testament. One arises from opposite interpretations of the event predicted, a messianic age in which the kingdom of the Jews will be established on earth in perpetual righteousness and glory, or the coming to earth of God's only begotten Son, incarnate in human form, for the salvation of all mankind. The other arises from opposite answers to the question whether the prediction on either interpretation has been fulfilled. It is, of course, the Christian view that the prophets foretold the coming of Christ, and that their prophecy has been fulfilled. But more than that, Christian apologists and theologians seem to make the fulfillment of Hebrew prophecies, interpreted as foreshadowing the truths of the Christian religion, a source of verification for these truths. The difference between Jesus Christ and Muhammad, according to Pascal, is that Muhammad was not foretold. Jesus Christ was foretold. I see many contradictory religions, and consequently all false save one, he writes. Each wants to be believed on its own authority, and threatens unbelievers. I do not therefore believe them. Everyone can say this, everyone can call himself a prophet, but I see the Christian religion wherein prophecies are fulfilled, and that is what everyone cannot do. And in another place, Pascal declares that the prophecies are the strongest proof of Jesus Christ. If one man alone had made a book of predictions about Jesus Christ as to the time and manner, and Jesus Christ had come in conformity to these prophecies, this fact would have infinite weight. But there is much more here. Here is a succession of men during 4,000 years, who consequently and without variation come one after another to foretell this same event. Centuries earlier, Augustine writes in a similar vein, "The Hebrew people as a whole are chosen to perform this prophetic function, to foretell, sometimes through men who understood what they spake, and sometimes through men who understood not, all that has transpired since the advent of Christ until now, and all that will transpire." Not only the explicit prophecies which are contained in words, but all the rituals and ceremonies, the offices and institutions of the Jewish religion prefigure Christianity, signifying and foreannouncing those things which we who believe in Jesus Christ unto eternal life believe to have been fulfilled, or behold in process of fulfillment, or confidently believe shall yet be fulfilled.